Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing An Hour Before It's Dark by Marillion.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So there's a lot to say about this album, but before I get into the entire shenanigans of this review, let's get into my favorite bits from this album. So in these times, we are unfortunately losing a lot of what made 70s and 60s prog so memorable, with King Crimson announcing that they've stopped basically doing concerts and releasing music a few months ago, and losing a lot of main figures in the prog genre. But this is also a time to remember how lucky we are to have some neo-prog bands from the 80s who still are creating music for us, like Marillion. The forefathers of neo-prog, Marillion, have come a long way from their debut album of Script for a Gesture's Tear when creating a lot of different things, and although their lineup has changed in a while and we don't have Fish anymore, they still create some really great music, and this album is an example for it. Now personally, although I am not so well acquainted with their discography, I think that this one features probably what is their most mature vocals and most mature sound as of now, and I like that very much. And this one coming off 6 years after the last release of Fear, which stands for Fuck Everything and Run. This one also have the same ideology by Steve Hogarth, that the world is coming to some sort of doomness, and that's all the more frightening with what's happening right now with the pandemic and the things that are happening in the war in Ukraine, and that's quite frightening, and this album comes in this time of darkness and it actually gives some glimpse of light. Now before I actually get to reviewing this album, I have to point out some things. So the first one is this album doesn't really strive to be all that impressive and experimentary in musical form, but rather it prides itself in its lyrics and the message that it tries to convey. There's a lot of criticism to way that Steve Hogarth does his thing, and I like that very much, and I think he's the perfect person to actually lead this album into the message that he's trying to convey. Another thing I have to add about this album, this might not be about the band but more about the way that it was released. At least on Spotify, this album has 18 separate tracks, when in actuality this album has only 7, which 4 of them are subdivided into sub-tracks. So that's how I'm gonna refer to it. I'm gonna look at this album as if it has 7 tracks. So we are firstly introduced to the first track called Be Hard on Yourself, which starts off with this really lovely choir which sounds kinda angelic and sort of Latin in some way, and immediately we are given the lyrics and the vocals by Steve Hogarth, which has this really lovely old man voice. And in order, we are introduced to all the band members on here, and especially I liked Mark Kelly on the keyboards. I think he does a fantastic job in embracing the overall feeling of this album and making it a whole lot whole. And this track specifically doesn't really beat around the bush and actually goes ahead and delivers its message quite starkly, and I like it very much. And there's even one quote from this track which was kind of memorable to me, and I want to read it out for you. Paint a picture, sing a song, plant some flowers in the park, get out and make it better, you've got an hour before it's dark. I find this one to be lovely, and I think it encapsulates the idea of this album in this one verse, which I love all the more. Now, a lot of the tracks on this album are basically meaning put into song, and I like it very much. I think my favorite track on here has to be Murder Machines, which has a really interesting comparison between what COVID is doing to us and to what we are doing to the world, and I like the way that they take this and create this allegory. And when speaking about allegories, I think the most stark track about this has to be Sierra Leone. Now that track talks about a person who finds a diamond hidden in the sands of Sierra Leone, and instead of selling it, he actually keeps it himself because it's more valuable to him. And I don't know exactly what it's supposed to represent, but I do like the fact that he keeps it to himself because it gives meaning to his life, while the money wouldn't give the same meaning. And the last track of Care also basically hinders the first one, saying that we only have an hour before it's dark, and that means that we have to take action before everything is irreversible and the world is gonna doom. And you know, with everything that's going on in Ukraine right now and the assumptions that the media is giving us about how this is gonna escalate, I don't really feel confident about anything being promised to us in the next, months, days, weeks, years time. I don't know what's gonna happen. Hopefully we can at least finish 2022, because honestly I have to make this series last for the entire year. So yeah, if it's 2023 and you're watching this video, this means we're still alive and everything has passed, or at least has subsided in some way that makes us still living. And if you're not, we're doomed. And unfortunately, I didn't really like the way that this album ended. I think that the last sub part of the last track was like the weakest one out of them all, and I didn't like it all that much. I think that they could have utilized the same choir as they utilized in the beginning at the end, because it was so fitting to be used over there. I was actually genuinely surprised when the choir just didn't start singing at the end. But it's okay, I guess, because this album is pretty great all throughout. So yeah, as I said, this album isn't all that more complex and memorable in the melodical sense, but it does deliver this really unique message that we all should take into our hearts and listen to. We do get some pretty nice solos once in a while, but honestly, it's not the foundation this album is put upon. I just really hope that this album will stay remembered for the message, and that's about all I have to say about this section of the album. So thank you, Marillion, for bringing us this lovely piece in this time of darkness in order to help us cope and think about what we can do in order to improve our lives on this earth. And hopefully, just hopefully, this wouldn't be their last masterpiece. So this cover is like straight iconic fuel shit. Like honestly, I wouldn't be forgetting this album anytime soon. The vibrant colors on here are something you don't usually see in most covers of most albums, at least in the prog scene, and I like the way that they're laid down and representing a clock in some way. And if you want to get real nitpicky, I think that the two main ones that look like the dials are the black one and the blue one, which if you translate it to an analog clock would mean that the hour is 11:30, and in a lot of places in the world this means an hour before total darkness. And yeah, I also love the really subtle drops of liquid on the cover that you can't really see, that they've just stained this cover. I love it as an added thing on here, and I think it has the same effect, although a lot subtler, like the effect that the tomato has on the Yes album Termato. I think it's a lovely little thing that they added, and I'm gonna remember it as well. So yeah, this is a cool cover, very memorable, very noticeable, and not one that I'm gonna forget anytime soon. So when it comes to the rating of this album, this one is quite different from the rest, because probably it is the first album on here that I'm not rating according to the music found on here, but more according to the message, the lyrics, the way that they sing on here. And I'm putting the music a bit aside and focusing more on the message, and this album for this is gonna get an 8 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I had a fantastic time making it. I was actually supposed to review a completely different album today, but because I noticed that the album I was recommended was nowhere near being prog, but was actually, I think, neo soul, I decided to replace it with another album. And what proper album would it be if not for Marillion's latest release? So yeah, that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for tomorrow, because we're going to be listening to We'll Talk About It Later by the band Nucleus. But have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.